Hi, welcome to Educator.com. Today in web design, we're going to be covering the setting up the files for Photoshop, your photos, how to export them out correctly, and actually setting up your hierarchy in Adobe Dreamweaver. So the first part here, in Photoshop, you can take any of your photography that you actually might want to use and how we're going to appropriately export it out. We did do in the previous lesson how to export out images in Photoshop using stuff you created. Now we're going to actually show you how to use one extra little tool to actually resize your images and to get them correctly into Dreamweaver. And then we're just going to cover basically the hierarchy of the web development, so you can kind of see how it should be organized and how Dreamweaver actually interprets those files and how it's a little bit easier once you set them up correctly. So the first portion we're going to actually look at is we're going to go into Photoshop first, and this is an image that I brought in just to kind of demonstrate how we're going to resize this. Right now this image size is a little bit large, so for the web we don't need an image that large. So as it might look small on your screen, you always got to know your actual sizes, and we measure everything in pixels for the most part. There's different measurements you can use, still inches, and but pixels is really you're going to be your best friend when you actually go into web development. So let's start to edit this down real quick. So in Photoshop, when you select an image, you actually get this image size little window here. And right now I'm dealing in pixels, so you have percents and pixels. You can also see we have inches and all these other increments, but pixels is really what you want to use. I'm just going to go and put this image size in 200 pixels, and it automatically configures the height as well to be proportionate. So if you don't want that, you can also just unselect this little chain link here, and actually will allow you to put in whatever size you want. And if you wanted to not to be proportional for some reason, you actually can do that as well. Okay, and it kind of gives you all these little dimensions here. 72 resolution is perfectly normal. You really don't want to bump up your extra resolution too high, because again, your file sizes really get really large. So be aware of that as you're actually using your images. This is perfectly acceptable. It shows it very clearly. I don't think you're really going to see too much of a difference if something is 300 resolution versus a 72 right now, if the image is done correctly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And you're going to see it actually shrinks up a little bit. And when we're resizing a lot of these photos, you basically want to keep in mind always the size and when you export things out. So let's go back here. I don't need to crop this tool any further. Let's see here. Let's hit OK. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and get a better look at this. So I have this whole photo. Now, again, it's already been cropped. If I wanted to crop it further, it's up to you. If you remind you real quick, the crop tool here, it's kind of like the photo editing tool. So if I wanted to just take this down a little bit more, maybe I don't want so much of that, and I wanted to crop it a little bit tighter, I can do that. And my photo is a little bit more cropped now, so it won't be exactly 200 pixels anymore. It's going to be a little bit smaller now. And down here it kind of gives you the dock size, 126K. So you definitely have that. You have a smaller resolution. So now, if you remember, we actually went to export this out using a safer web devices, and I'll bring this window back over here. So we have these different file types. So if you remember last time I said, we have the GIF files and PNG files, and we have the JPEG files. For this, there's not a real reason to use a PNG file or GIF file. So suitably, JPEG is going to be good enough for this. And again, keep in mind of your quality size. This file size doesn't really have to be that big, or the actual image doesn't have to be really high resolution. It's a perfectly clear image, especially when you're taking down an image, you're making it smaller. It's going to be actually a little bit more clear because the pixels are actually being a little bit closer to each other and not being spread apart. If you've ever realized it in photography, your cameras will have you know, an 8 megapixel, 9 megapixel. The higher megapixel, the more actual dots per inch within, or color dots in each square of inch of the photo, so it actually shows up clear. When you start pulling it apart or any image, it starts to get a little pixelated. It's missing color basically. So in this case, we didn't do that. We actually shrunk it down, so we're actually okay. Then you would just save your photo out again to the appropriate name. So I already kind of saved this photo, so I'm going to just go to the actual folder part and get you out of there. So if you're this part, you will repeat the process over and over. If you're going to actually be using Photoshop for a lot of your images, you'll again just save them all into an image folder, which I'm going to show you right now. The ideal way to create this and what the purpose is. So I'm just going to cancel out all this. We don't need any of this here. Okay, and we're gonna go right into the actual folder part and Dreamweaver. So another tool that, you know, I've been talking about a little bit, and this tool is your web editor. Okay, this is basically where you're gonna write and design all your web stuff, and to bring in all these images and everything that you've been working on is now going to come in to life, and writing the appropriate language for it so that it can actually be viewable on the World Wide Web. Okay,